Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting comics-based edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am delighted to be joined on this episode by Miss Lasko-Gross. Did I say your name correctly and all of
It
that?
it is correct. I think where people sometimes go a little off is that they think Miss is an honorific, like, oh, she's so fancy. But it's Miss. It's like Missy without the Y.
Nice, nice, nice. Uh, yeah, very cool. So I was admiring your shelf, and those that check out the video version can appreciate this as well. I, of course, have a digital shelf behind me, but yours is real. I see Kindred back there. I see Batman something, all sorts of wonderful books back
Yeah.
there. So you are a person
Rose
who is,
Hernandez.
oh yes,
Yeah.
you are steeped in reading and visualizing and all of those things. That's the immediate impression that I get.
You would be correct. I am in a family of bibliophiles. The shelf runs a very long distance. Um, I'm tempted to be tacky and pan, but I won't do that because I'm a because I'm a responsible adult who is doing an interview right here. But yeah, we're a family obsessed with books, and we cull every year, and we donate or sell a lot of books. But uh, we continue the feeding of our brains perpetually.
Nice.
So your assessment is correct.
Yeah, yeah. And then once you call and give away, you get to find new things to replace. It's always a good thing. Always a good
Yes.
thing. I'm one of those people that spends a lot of time looking through Amazon recommendations, net galleys, and all of that sort of thing. So, uh, kindred spirit here, noticing kindred over there again. So what drew you to comics initially?
Hmm. I think I was always going to do something in the arts, but I think in particular comics spoke to me because they were so immediate and they were a way to, for someone who feels like they're not being listened to, it's a way to present an entire world from your perspective and make people see things your way and to be
Mhm.
heard and to be seen. And I would entertain people with comics, very immature stuff. Like I started in elementary school, and it was just a way to be funny and a way to be appreciated when I felt like maybe in other venues I was not being appreciated.
Yeah, I'm going to quote you on that, a way of being heard and being seen, and at the same time, pretty immediately.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so what do comics now allow you to do as a creator and as a storyteller?
Oh, it's kind of an adult version of the same thing, except now what I'm talking about is not like this very funny farting dog. There was a little flatulent dog I used to do stories about, and that was like, the toast of like fifth or sixth grade. But I feel like now when I want to talk about my worldview, how I feel about the political landscape in particular,
Mm.
maybe in the last decade or so, give or take, like I feel like I have a lot to say. And the book that I've been working on, actually it's three books I've been working on, although only one of them has been released, Henny. And then I did a sequel which was finished years ago but not released, which is a story I can get into if you have an interest in some
Yes,
tidbits
yeah.
later. Henny in the Lowlands, and I'm just currently finishing up. Oh, there's my neighborhood. And I'm just currently finishing up Henny, which the third one I think is going to be called The Heretic Zoo, but I'm not 100% on that yet. I'm still playing around with the ideas. But that I've been working on for those three books I've is what I've been up to for the most part in the last decade.
Mm.
And they're my way of being entertaining, not being didactic, but also getting to express a lot of real things.
Mm.
I tend to, whether I'm doing fiction or nonfiction, I like it to be, I like it to be truth telling. So even though it's a fantasy world with cat people um and an absolutely like chaotic, almost medieval world, I'm saying things about human nature, even though they're not human, that are real.
Yeah, and I love that affordance of whatever you want to call it, fantasy, science fiction, analogy, whatever the genre is or the label that you want to put on it. I love that. And The Heretic Zoo is a great title.
Thank you. I'll take that into advisement. All right, I have a one vote for Heretic Zoo.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's just a cool play on words. So the work that I know you for most is probably A Mess of Everything.
Mhm.
I want to make sure I get the title right, Escape from Special. I know you for those. And then you also have, I think it's Family Project, Sweetest, is that right?
The sweetness was I was the writer and my husband was the artist on that book.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very fun little series from Z2. Two badass women drug smugglers in space, smuggling sugar, which doesn't exist anywhere outside of Earth, so is a very hot commodity. And that was
Mm-hmm.
just a very fun, like raunchy, goofy sci-fi romp. So very different. I think that sometimes if you're a comic book artist, people are like, okay, what's the thing that they do?
Yeah.
And I think people are more comfortable with creators that sit in a genre and give them not necessarily like predictable in an insulting way, but give them like they know what they're going to get. They're like, oh, if this is this person's book, and so it's going to feel like this. And I think it distresses people sometimes when you do like earnest guts and all autobio, like which is what I'm known for initially, and then you switch to like a raunchy fictional like dirty space pirate story, which is like funny and gory, and people are like, wait, who are you? And now being working on like like a fantasy book, which is like, you know, an allegory about the dangers of fundamentalist thinking and also a fun adventure, so people don't really know. And I think that sometimes hurts because you know, hurts me as like, I'm gonna use a terrible term and I'm gonna assume if you're not watching the video that there's the biggest of like air quotes and eye rolls around this, but like that's like what is my brand is something
Oh,
that
right.
people can't always pin down. So
I don't want to be
but
branded, you
comics,
know?
I know, and like also if I could be very real, like comics, they don't pay enough for me to not do like things I feel passionate about and
Hmm.
to follow my own muse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and on the reader side of that, I actually always appreciate it when I find somebody that does the different. I mean, it could be from a children's book to like a really hard-hitting adult graphic novel or novel. You know, I love that range, and I love to see when people kind of play and explore and expand themselves. So, yeah, I think there are people out there that kind of look for the brand and that connect to a particular story, but then hopefully what they get is kind of growing with you or getting to see different things with you as an artist. I don't know, but again, that's me, and I'm just the guy that voted for Heretic Zoo. I'm just that one voice out there, but that's that's something
Oh,
that I enjoy.
thank you. I think that it's like I don't have any regrets about doing it that way, but I understand how that can be kind of disconcerting to some people when they expect a certain thing from you. But I also think for people who have been my fans since like the 90s and are very they have a very high level of reading comprehension. I tend to have like a lot of like academics in my corner, and people can see the through line
Hmm.
from like what I was saying before about the worldview being like, oh, okay, this autobio story that's really like a gritty view of like boogers, warts and all, of like the way a kid sees a world and being a special ed student. And then seeing how they can relate that to even in the sci-fi work, and then in Henny, her character, while her character is not the same person as I was, they see a worldview. They see like a continuance of a certain sense of humor and
Hmm.
sensibility.
Hmm.
So I like to think that it's all of a piece, even if like for a casual reader, that might not be apparent immediately.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I appreciate the autobiographical or semi autobiographical as well. Has it been rewarding to kind of explore aspects of your story that way in comics?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the paradox, and I tell this to my students when if they're attempting their first autobiographical story, is that the more specific you get, and the more you talk about the deepest, darkest personal things that you'd want to hide if you were a reasonable person and not a cartoonist, because those are mutually exclusive. But those are the things that make you the most relatable and are
Mhm.
actually the things that people connect with the most. So it's not about being like safe and being cute and being like, oh, everybody has done this, because it's the things like when you have a reading experience of like, oh my God, I thought I was the only person who felt that way. And it's not the stuff
Mhm.
we talk about, but the deeper in you go, like the more connected you are to everybody.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and
All of our secret shames.
yeah, and you get to feel like you're not alone as a
Yeah.
result of it. Yeah. So you mentioned that there was a sort of a book that was in development, but then wasn't published, which is so two things I'm going to mention. One is if you're listening out there and you don't know that comics are also for adults, welcome to the conversation. Some folks still have that one story of comics as like Garfield or Looney Tunes or whatever superhero story. So just to point that out. But then also, comics and publishing in general is a very interesting, long haul, complicated process. So, uh,
It is. It's a journey, and sometimes it goes a little off the rails. In
mhm,
this case, Henny was done with a publisher called Z2 Comics, and it was really well received. I won a Yalsa for that book, and it was, doing well in the sense of like in the context of a, young adult graphic novel. Um, the second book was finished, and let me see if I can keep this story kind of cute. And so the book was finished for a long time, and it was solicited, and I kept waiting on like, well, when is this going to print? Because it's been done for a year at a certain point. And then after being put off for a while, I got the word, it's like, oh, well, this publisher is going in a different direction, and now they do tie-ins with popular bands. Um, so here I am with a sequel
mhm,
where the first book is with one publisher, and then I have the middle book in a 3-book series.
mhm.
And what I ended up doing, because it was just it was a very frustrating thing and a hard thing to take to a publisher for a number of reasons, which I'm I'm not going to bore your audience with because it's like very technical and marketing and rights. But I ended up putting out a limited edition. So it's really like it's a boutique book that very few people own right now, but it is out there. And I'm just, now that I'm finishing the third one and I have what is essentially like an over 700 page uh graphic opus, um I can take it to a publisher, and I'm in talks with a publisher. Nothing I can report yet. But it was incredibly frustrating because you feel like if you're not putting out a book every couple of years, you sort of disappear in people's minds. I've been very fortunate that in those years, I was able to be part of some really wonderful high profile projects, Drawing Power, which was, I believe, Diane Newman's last published book. And she was a wonderful woman. If you're not familiar with her work, you should check it out, who unfortunately we lost earlier um this last year, I think technically at the end of last year. But she was a giant and a genius. And her book was, it was like a Me Too graphic anthology with mostly women artists. And that won an Eisner, deservedly so. I can't take credit for that. I can just take credit for my story in it. But I was also in Embodied, which was like a intersectional feminist poetry and comics anthology where they paired poets with uh cartoonists, and we did stories together. So I feel like while I haven't been invisible, it's been a very frustrating to have all this work that I want to share with the world, and I'm just sitting on this giant book and it's not out yet.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the connections between poetry and comics
Yeah.
because I think they're there, and yeah. very exciting work to connect those two ways of communicating. And both are so much about what's on the page, the economy of words, the specific choices, everything is there for a reason.
It's an intense marriage, and I was lucky enough to be paired with the creator of the book, Wendy Chin Tanner, the poet, and she did this beautiful poem, which I had to tackle the visuals of, but it was about giving birth after you've had an abortion in the past. And it was like very, very heavy stuff. And to strike a tone between like where do you want to be literal and where do you want to be a little more metaphorical in the imagery was like, that was an incredible challenge that was super fun. I think it came out really well too. That's a great book.
And talk about a story that connects to people and uh, part of society that often isn't talked about or is talked about in these really negative and pejorative and limited ways. So powerful work.
Yeah. Yeah. I was happy to be part of that project. That was very cool.
So we have the third Henny coming with current title in development. And so any particular spaces, you talked about the boutique book, but any spaces that you'd like to share where it would be best to get your work? Because I know we can go to like the major chains and purchase some things there, but
Mhm.
any resources that way where people can go and find the things that you're creating.
Okay. Well, the first place I would tell you to look, because because I want to be a decent human being, is like local bookstore and have them order something. But where I know for sure you can find it is unfortunately Amazon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Carries most of my books, and I am on Instagram. I don't post every day, but I do post like sneak peeks if you want to get uh like a sense of where the Heretic Zoo working title is.
Mm-hmm.
I do post some pics there. So I encourage people who are interested in seeing my work to follow me on Instagram, and it's just my name, Miss Lasko-Gross.
Fantastic. And you've done work with Fantagraphics.
My first two
So
books were with Fantagraphics.
yeah, people can also check out things there. But I enjoy the images of the work in progress that you share on social media
Thank
as
you.
well. Yeah. So
It's nice to get
looking,
feedback. You feel like you're making these things in a vacuum sometimes.
yeah.
So even just someone being like, "Oh, awesome panel," you're just like, "Ah, that feels good." That's a little hit of dopamine.
Little dopamine to carry the page through.
Just a soup song, just a little bit.
Yep. So anything that we missed before we kind of wrap up?
Um,
Anything that was on the list that I didn't necessarily get to?
I don't think so. I think that was a nice little encapsulation of where I am and what I'm doing.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I'm so glad I think it was through social media that I discovered your work. And I'm always, as I mentioned, I'm sort of like patrolling around and trying to find comics and trying to find interesting things. So glad that I came across your work and glad to share about it with listeners out there as well.
Yeah, it was lovely talking with you and your gorgeous fake bookshelf.
That's right. That's right.
The
This
treachery.
book, this one right here, that's my favorite. That thick white one right there.
Oh,
That's
that's a great one. I read
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Life
Re
changing work.
required reading now all the
Hmm.
time. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But you can. Most of these books do represent something that I've probably read at some point. Like that's probably Ulysses, right there. Is probably what that one is.
Hmm.
But I prefer your actual bookshelf,
Thank you.
and I get sort of like the. I'm not. You don't have to pan or anything, but I can sort of imagine what those are up there because like
I'll
at the
do let
bottom.
here. Let me give you a little
Oh,
little bit this way. And then we go
nice.
a little bit that way.
That's the
And
dream. That is the dream.
it goes up and to the floor. Yeah, the bookshelf. The I mean, if we could have like all the walls be bookshelves, then again it would
Mm.
be kind of like an allergy nightmare, but it would look very cool.
Oh yeah, like the in those fantasy movies where you walk into a library and it's almost like Fantasia, where it's just books stacked up. Yeah, like
Oh
an
yeah, I always
elevator.
feel a twinge of jealousy, and I'm like, I don't even care if there's like magical hands or pixies like throwing the books around. I'm just like, oh, and then the little ladder, the little sliding ladder that you could be on.
Yeah, which is a must. It's a must.
It is. In reality, probably like very squeaky, probably like a hazard. I would probably break my hip at some point, like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
'cause I'm just making emphatic gestures trying to grab some book out of reach. So probably better left in the realm of fantasy than
True,
reality.
true, true. But one can dream.
Yes.
Um, yep. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation and glad to share about your work and hope to talk with you again sometime soon when the as yet untitled, I'm still voting for Heretic Zoo, but when that's out in the world, glad to talk with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very nice talking with you.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.